why do you think the Netanyahu, whoever's running the show now, okay, I know there's, why do you think that they're not acting as decisively? I know, I get news. And unfortunately, by the way, Jeremy, you should just know this, that probably 70-80% of American Jews are not getting this information. They're not getting everything. That's why I wanted to bring you on this podcast. I wanted my listeners to hear this, number one, and to meet you. And number two, they're not finding out what you just said, which is that there are attacks every day. Every day. You got to get like on one of these WhatsApp groups to get this information, because CNN and not even Fox is covering it. So why do you think they're not doing what's necessary to put an end to this, or at least knock it down somewhat?
Okay, well, now we've really entered into politics of Israel, and which is totally fine and understandable because we've talked about like the Geula and very high ideals, but really that's what Abraham was called to do, was to build a kingdom, right? I mean, the famous saying of Tikkun Olam, there's an ending to that. Tikkun Olam b'malchut Shaddai. It's to fix the world in the kingdom of God, meaning there's going to be a kingdom with an army and taxes and politics, and even, I mean, every kingdom, every country is going to have yicky things in politics, but through that, it's not to like separate ourselves from the world, and it's not an individual effort. One person can maybe save a whale, one person can take a vow of silence and reach very godly heights, but a nation, a country with politics, if they do it the right way, can change the whole world, and that's what we're tasked with. We don't just have like our personal redemption, but we really believe in a national redemption, and that's amazing. So let's talk about the politics of Israel right now. I think that I would love to commission a cartoon. And the cartoon would be like this: Benjamin Netanyahu and Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, which are sort of like the three faces of the right wing in Israel. And they're driving the car. And they're sitting on the lap of an older man, like their father. And they're like, yay, we're driving the car. We're going way. And whenever the father really wants to make a turn, he grabs onto the wheel and is able to pull it to the left or step on the brakes and halt us. And that father in the cartoon would be called the court system, the legal system, the elite left that Ben Gurion sort of positioned at the very establishment of the state of Israel that elect themselves. And what we've discovered through this last just tumultuous time in Israel is that they are the leaders of Israel. They are the ones that have the final say. And so, for example, the Minister of National Security wanted to fire one of the chief of police because he says, you're not doing a good enough job. Now, in Israel, the law is the Yoetz Mishpati, the legal advisor of every ministry, is the final say, not the minister. The legal advisor, even though the word is Yoetz, the word is advisor, somehow in the legal systems of Israel, it is turned in that the legal advisor has more power than the minister himself. So Itamar Ben-Gvir wanted to remove the chief of police, and the Yoetz Mishpati, the legal advisor, says it's not legal for you to do that. And so imagine that. There's a country that literally can't function because there are two warring realities. So we are not like a sovereign democracy right now. There's a small group of people that are unelected by the nation of Israel. They're very ideological people, very educated people, and they all are like one cahoot. And I would say that the Supreme Court and the legal system in Israel, they probably represent the Meretz party at large. Elite, secular, academic, very left wing, very woke, let's call them. And so the Meretz party did not pass the threshold in the last election. So they are a very small minority in the Israeli public, but yet they are the final decision on everything in Israel, the final decision on everything. Imagine that. So even though we have a right-wing government that wants to implement certain policies, when they try to implement a policy, all it takes is one legal advisor to say, nope, I think that that is not legal. And then everything is stopped. So our country right now is not able to function as an organism because the organisms themselves are at attack with each other. And that's what they were trying to do with this judicial reform. They said, we have to fix this situation. It's impossible. And so, but then you saw what happened, which was really, truly remarkable. It was like watching Jewish history unfold as there were hundreds of thousands of people sometimes in the streets protesting. They don't want a judicial reform. And so what's going on here? And so we are literally watching or participating in Jewish history here in Israel.
And how would you, you know, without getting further and further into the merits or demerits of each side's view, how would you, as someone who values unity, peace, and love, right, within the Jewish people, you made a comment before, Jeremy, about how you've got two Arab villages at they've got their own stuff, and that's been one of the reasons, one of the many reasons, that Israel has been successful against some of her Arab neighbors is there's been disunity amongst the Arabs. How do we make sure that we don't fall prey, or that we aren't falling prey to the same issue of fighting so much amongst ourselves that we, A, can't get anything done, and B, we can't remain a unified, strong force against our true enemies?
Well, I'll tell you, I wrote an article. It's the first article in the new Mizrahi magazine that's coming out for Yom HaAtzmaut. And it's coming out, I imagine, in the next week or so in the shuls around the world. And in it, I call it 75 Years to Israel, the third generation. And in my opinion, it is the greatest test that is before us now. And what does it say? Ki tolid banim uvnei banim venoshamtem ba'aretz. You'll come into the land, and your children will have children, and you'll become old and take it for granted. And venoshamtem ba'aretz. And then all hell breaks loose. The Torah tells us that's what's going to happen. The third generation, everything is going to fall apart. And when you look throughout Jewish history, it's exactly what happens over and over again. So you can see first there was Shaul HaMelech, that was good. Then we had King David, that was great. Then we had Solomon, peak, then the downfall. And we can just see over and over again throughout Jewish history. There was Matityahu Kohen HaGadol, then Yehuda Maccabi, then Shimon. Then the Hasmonean dynasty sort of crumbles a little bit. It kind of becomes corrupt. And here we are now, 75 years, we're in the third generation. And Israel right now, I would say, is falling exactly into that trap of just taking it for granted. And so thank God that just a few days ago, all of Israel stood for the 6 million. Thank God. The whole country stopped because it didn't matter if you were right wing, left wing, Hasidic, Orthodox, Litvish, you were a Jew, you were in the graves. And so it's a reminder. And, it's like the living the Bible, whenever the Jews become disjointed, God sends an external enemy in the Bible to like bring us back to our senses. And so we're at a real critical point right now in Jewish history that we're really being tested. But in some ways, I feel like this judicial reform and everything that's going on now could not be better. I'm a very optimistic person, but I think it is just the best thing that could have happened. I did not understand that we weren't in control of our own country because they're out in the streets in the name of democracy, but I didn't really realize how undemocratic Israel was, how important figuring this thing out is. No one really understood how powerful that small group of people were, that they were able to shut down the banks, the airports, the malls, everything just shut down. It's like, whoa, you guys lost the election. What's going on here? It was like, it's painful right now, but in some ways, Israel has never been closer to each other because now it's all on the table. All of, like, let's say the pus has come out, and now it's okay. Now it's time to heal. Now we have to figure this thing out. And so it was a painful process, bloody pus, everything's coming out, but that's like a part of the healing process. So I'm very optimistic that Israel is heading in the right direction.
That's very, very inspiring and encouraging to hear. I always said, people were asking me, a lot of my students, like, such conflict, such turmoil. I said, first of all, Israel is exercising its democracy by hundreds of thousands of people being out on the streets and protesting and fighting and arguing, and no one's getting killed, God forbid, no one's getting injured. Okay, so that's, we got to remember that that's unfortunately what happens in other countries, in dictatorships and totalitarian regimes, where people can't express their point of view, they can't go out and assemble in public. So I think that's amazing, and I'm very happy to hear from you that you think, like, as difficult and as divisive this whole thing was, or is still to some degree, it's something that's necessary for the country to go through. That the scab has to come off, so to speak, so that people can heal and the country can get fixed, because it's broken to some degree, you're saying.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that right now the country is not able to function properly. Meaning, I was so inspired by my time in Dubai. I feel like so often Israel looks to Europe and looks to the United States for inspiration and leadership. Where right next to us on the other direction, toward the east, there's a very inspiring country called Dubai. And they're They were sand dunes. And he goes, yeah, but they have oil. It's not true. Their oil is like a fraction, I think less than 5% of their GDP. But they've made the largest building in the world, the biggest mall in the world, the largest solar field in the world. They're already going to space now. Like they have done something truly remarkable. And it's because their leader is very principled and he lives by certain principles. And he was the first one to reach out in peace to Israel. That's why I wanted my family to go there. It felt so amazing to be a Jew with a kippah and tzitzit walking through a Muslim country and seeing like everyone's people from Saudi Arabia with women that only show their eyes, and German tourists with short shorts and tank tops, and everyone is walking around there just having a blast. It's just so like there is what to learn. And so I feel like Israel is on a trajectory, and that's really important to remember that Hodu Hashem ki tov ki leolam chasto. Give thanks to God, for his love endures forever. That's what it says. And I heard a beautiful idea that ki leolam chasto, really to see God's chesed, you have to have a perspective of leolam. You have to have a little bit more of a bird's eye view to really see the plan that unfolds. And so right now there's like ups and downs and political challenges and demonstrations. But when my grandfather first walked to Israel, there were 60,000 Jews in the land of Israel. Today, we're almost at 7 million Jews. We have the strongest army in the world, one of the most powerful economies in the world. Like, there is a trajectory with all the ups and the downs. Israel is on a tear. And it is like so amazing to be a part of really the greatest Jewish project, arguably in human history. What we're doing in this country against all odds and with all conflicts, we are like figuring it out as a people of Israel in the most challenging of places. And we all know that the whole world is watching us. I mean, so much of my work is dealing with the non Jewish world because when I broadcast, it has wings. You just don't know who's on the other side. But, I build a little house on a farm in the desert, and nation states tried to sue us in Israel's Supreme Court. The whole world, whether they want to or not, are watching this little country called Israel and wondering if we're going to make it. Because if we do make it, wow, a lot of identities are going to be formed by that. And if we don't make it, a lot of identities will be formed like that. So much of everyone's identity, an atheist identity is tied in to the success and failure of Israel. Jewish identity is tied in to the success and failure of Israel. Christian identity is tied in to the fate and the success of Israel. If God manifests an amazing country and all the visions of the prophets come to pass in this little land, it's going to rock everyone's world. And they know that either consciously or subconsciously. So everyone is always sort of looking, I wonder what's happened over there in the land of Israel because it's a big deal. We are the city on the hill. And so I'm just very optimistic because I have a little bit of a le'olam chasdo.